As Carla said, my name is Zoe and I'm a graduate consultant at Arup, and we've been working with Innovate UK on this piece of research around innovation within local authorities. And James will be presenting more on his work around technology demonstrators, and I'm going to be talking a bit more about the research we've been doing on collaboration between local authorities and SMEs. So next slide, please. So the purpose of this research was really to understand how local authorities and SMEs are currently working together, and also to identify recommendations so that local authorities and SMEs can better and more frequently collaborate around innovative service delivery. Next slide, please. So why is this so important? So firstly, collaboration is a really important aspect of innovation. And in particular, we think that collaborating with small and medium enterprises has the potential to revolutionise local authority services. For example, introducing new technologies and different ways of working. And secondly, the potential kind of localization of business rates means that it might be even more important for local authorities to support and work with SMEs in their area. So research by the Federation of Small Businesses has shown that local authority spending has a far greater impact on their local economies when money is spent with small firms, so generating an additional 63 pence of benefits for every pound spent, compared to just 40p when spent with large local firms. Next slide, please. So to understand how local authorities are currently working together and to identify recommendations, we surveyed over 100 organisations, including SMEs, local authorities, and also wider ecosystem stakeholders, and conducted further interviews to develop a much more kind of nuanced and further insight into their experiences, challenges, and opportunities. We also looked at the literature on existing approaches and programmes, many of which we have signposted throughout the report itself. So in terms of the SMEs we spoke to, the majority were representative of small and emerging businesses. So the insight from this research is really focused more on the challenges and enablers as experienced by those who are either kind of currently trying to break into the local authority market or have recently done so. So next slide, please. So firstly, we really wanted to recognise what is working well and some of the really strong work that SMEs and local authorities have been doing over the last few years to improve service delivery. So local authorities are recognised as extremely good clients. And while there's this kind of common perception that local authorities can be quite slow to innovate, we really wanted to kind of try and challenge some of these assumptions. In particular, the speed of decision making did come up a lot. However, it was also recognised that local authorities can be slow for very, very valid reasons. And it was raised that this much more kind of considered approach to decision making is in part what makes local authorities such reliable clients to work with. Other benefits of working with local authorities were also widely acknowledged, in particular that they're very well networked and they clearly talk to each other, which for an SME presents significant opportunities for them to scale. It was also suggested that local authorities are well placed to deal with multi-stakeholder problems. So in the case of more kind of transformational innovation, having that access to data or the kind of convening power that a local authority has is incredibly valuable to an SME. And then finally, innovation cultures within local authorities are definitely improving, and it's clear that more authorities are becoming much more mature innovators. And you can see this in the work that Coventry and Milton Keynes have been doing as part of the UK Autodrive project, as well as Camden's ongoing commitment to open data. Next slide, please. However, there is also a general consensus that there is still room for improvement, particularly around making these opportunities for collaboration easier and more regular. So having spoken to people, it's not necessarily to say that local authorities need to provide more support in terms of the quantity or the amount of time and effort that they need to spend on SMEs. Instead, our recommendations are more about kind of streamlining processes, increasing visibility and sharing best practice with a focus on making things as easy as possible for everyone involved, as opposed to kind of creating more work for both local authorities and SMEs. So 5 broad themes emerged from the research, and this included relationships, value, data and IT systems, innovation cultures, and procurement. Next slide, please. So relationships came up again and again across almost all of the SMEs that we interviewed. So for the ones who had been successful in establishing commercial agreements with local authorities, they in part credited this to relationships with and word of mouth recommendations from senior champions within local authorities. But then on the flip side, those that were still trying to break into the market acknowledged the need to connect with these key figures, but were really, really struggling with gaining access to the right people. And there are a number of ways we think this could be reasonably addressed. The first being local events for SMEs, primarily to showcase their work to local authorities and to develop these valuable relationships, but also to create opportunities to workshop solutions around local challenges. So for example, civic hackathon style events could really help develop greater understanding between stakeholders in the local business and public sector communities. And another method of engagement could be through horizon scanning, which focuses on developing an awareness of emerging trends, technologies, and suppliers to enable longer term strategic decision making around kind of procurement and collaboration. And then finally, for kind of SMEs, I think it's really important to be able to identify and empower those people within local authorities who are really kind of championing innovation and SME collaboration. Next slide, please. So a common view amongst interviewees was that local authorities can often appear quite siloed, and where innovation does exist, it can often seem quite removed from core operational and decision-making activities. So we think there's a lot that can be done around integrating innovation and operational teams, particularly with the view to kind of support opportunities for scaling. However, it would be unfair to infer that these cultural challenges are only experienced by local authorities, and several of the more experienced SMEs we spoke to stressed the need to really understand and appreciate how local authorities are very different from other clients. And some SMEs we spoke to even have developed separate sales teams that focus solely on the local authority market. And it was noted that engaging with the local authorities can involve conversations with multiple people across different departments, each of which may have very, very different drivers. So how you engage with a procurement team will probably be quite different to, say, an operational team. So for SMEs, the recommendation here is about tailoring messages, trying to land it with 3 or 4 different people. So you're almost kind of anticipating those internal conversations and challenges. Next slide, please. And then in terms of procurement, there's some fantastic work that's already been done in the space, in particular the LGA's National Procurement Strategy for Local Government, which demonstrates successful strategies for showing leadership, behaving commercially, and obtaining value. And it even includes engagement with local SMEs as a key focus area. Pre-tender market engagement is something we think could benefit both SMEs and local authorities. We kept hearing from SMEs how time and resource intensive responding to bids is for them, and especially how this is much harder for them to absorb these overheads. So knowing where to kind of prioritize these resources through early market engagement could be incredibly beneficial to them. But also being able to kind of engage with the clients in advance of a bid helps them to kind of understand their problems better and help them to develop better responses. And then for local authorities, early engagement with the market could also help them to understand more about the potential solutions and their value, but also to help them articulate their requirements better and also to write better business cases. Next slide, please. The concept of value was discussed at length by several of our interviewees. The main challenge being that SMEs and local authorities articulate their challenges and opportunities in very different ways. For local authorities, the recommendation here is around kind of better communicating their pain points to SMEs, potentially through roadmaps or maybe directly as part of tender documents. And then for SMEs, a few particularly successful leaders stressed that SMEs really need to recognise that value for money is just one success criteria for local authorities, and that SMEs can strengthen their propositions by touching on different aspects of both kind of direct and indirect value, for example, things like social, environmental, inclusion or air quality. Next slide, please. And then finally, in terms of data, in order to generate any kind of real value and the most value from it, local authorities need to ensure that it's in a standard format, it's available, updated consistently, and can be linked with other data so it's traceable and accurate. This is a particular challenge where data is not necessarily owned by the local authority and instead sits with a supplier. So our recommendation to local authorities is to pay close attention to data sharing provisions when commissioning digital products, and the Guide to Promoting Interoperability and Data Access, which is published by Lottie and Public, sets out an extremely useful approach. And then for SMEs, it's really important to engage with operations, IT, procurement, the legal teams as early as possible to really engage and enable these open discussions around how best to meet the data needs of a project. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is just an overview of our recommendations. Obviously, this has been kind of a whistle-stop tour through the research, mainly focusing on the recommendations, and there's obviously a lot more detail in the report itself, so please do look out for that. Next slide, please. And yeah, please do get in contact with us at Arup if you have any questions about this work or any of the other work that we're doing in this space. Thank you very much.